Sign here, Mrs. Harrison. Just a formality. The orderly's voice was mechanical, rehearsed as he slid the clipboard across the cold metal desk. Lily stared at the papers through blurred vision, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the pen. The medication they'd forced down her throat 2 hours ago was taking effect, turning her thoughts to molasses, her words to cotton. Around her, the intake room of Riverside Psychiatric Hospital buzzed with fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly and unreal. I'm not insane," she whispered, but even to her own ears, the words sounded weak, desperate. Exactly how a crazy person would sound. The orderly exchanged a glance with the nurse standing by the door. That look, that pitying, knowing look that said they'd heard it all before. That every patient claimed to be sane. That her protests meant nothing. "Of course not, sweetheart," the nurse said in that condescending tone reserved for children and the mentally unstable. "You're just here to rest. Your husband explained everything. The paranoia, the violent outbursts, the delusions about him trying to hurt you. Violent outbursts. Delusions." The words hit Lily like physical blows because she knew exactly where they came from. Her husband Marcus had spent months planting these seeds, telling their friends she'd been acting strange, calling her doctor with concerns about her mental state, creating a paper trail of worry and evidence that would justify this moment. "My name is Lily Harrison, 42 years old, CEO of Harrison Digital Solutions, a company I built from nothing into a $200 million empire. Mother to a daughter I haven't seen in 3 days. And as of 6 hours ago, an involuntary patient in a psychiatric facility." The realization of what was happening had struck her that morning, when Marcus gently suggested she talk to someone about her stress. She'd agreed, thinking he meant a therapist's office. Instead, he'd driven her here to Riverside, where 2 orderlies and a doctor she'd never met were waiting with commitment papers already signed by her concerned husband. "You can't do this," Lily had screamed as they grabbed her arms. "I'm not sick. Marcus, please." But Marcus had just stood there in his expensive suit, his face arranged in perfect concern, and delivered his final blow. "Sweetheart, you need help. I'm doing this because I love you." Love. The word tasted like poison in her mouth now. She knew why he was doing this. 3 weeks ago, she'd overheard a phone conversation. Marcus, in his study, speaking in hushed tones about the trust and power of attorney, and once she's declared incompetent. She'd stood frozen outside the door, her heart turning to ice as she realized her husband of 15 years was plotting to have her committed so he could seize control of her fortune. The fortune she'd earned, the company she'd built, the life she'd created. "Mrs. Harrison, the signature?" The orderly's voice pulled her back to the present. Lily's hand hovered over the paper. If she signed, she was admitting herself voluntarily. If she refused, they'd commit her anyway. Marcus had already secured the court order. Either way, she was trapped. But as the pen touched paper, something shifted in her medicated fog. A memory, sharp and clear. Her cousin Daniel, Dr. Daniel Chen, the brilliant psychiatrist who just accepted a position at. Where was it? Her thoughts swam, trying to grab hold of the information. Riverside. He'd mentioned Riverside at their last family dinner 2 months ago. He was starting at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. Lily's hand steadied slightly. She signed the paper with her full legal name, carefully, deliberately. Then she looked up at the orderly with clearer eyes than he expected. "I'd like to request a specific doctor," she said quietly. "Dr. Daniel Chen. I believe he works here." The orderly frowned, checking his tablet. "Dr. Chen?" "Yeah, he's on staff. But you don't get to choose your attending physician, Mrs. Harrison. That's determined by hospital protocol." "I understand." Lily stood on shaking legs, trying to project a calmness she didn't feel. "But surely I have the right to request a consultation? For a second opinion?" The nurse and orderly exchanged another glance, this one less certain. I'll make a note in your file," the orderly finally said. As they led her down the corridor toward the women's ward, Lily's mind began to clear, sharpening against the sedatives they'd given her. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed she was alone, helpless without allies. He'd underestimated her because that's what he'd always done, even while benefiting from her success, even while spending her money, even while planning to steal everything she'd built. But she wasn't alone. And if Daniel was here, if he saw her file, if he realized what was happening. The heavy door to the ward clanged shut behind her, and Lily found herself in a long hallway lined with rooms. Other patients shuffled past in hospital gowns, their eyes vacant, their movements slow. This was her world now. At least, this was what Marcus intended to be her world forever. A woman in her 60s approached, her gray hair wild around her face. "You're new," she said, studying Lily with surprisingly sharp eyes. "What did you do? Forget to smile enough. Disagree with your husband." Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Something like that. "They all say they don't belong here," the woman continued. "But you actually don't. I can tell." Been here long enough to know the difference between crazy and caged. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast. The longer you're in here, the harder it is to convince anyone you're sane." Before Lily could respond, a nurse called out, "Harrison, room 237, let's go." Room 237 was small, sterile, with a single bed bolted to the floor and a window covered with heavy mesh. As the door locked behind her, Lily sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Marcus had won, or so he thought. But what he didn't know was that Lily Harrison hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by giving up when things got difficult. She'd survived boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, and competitors who'd tried to destroy her. She'd always been underestimated, always been counted out, and she'd always found a way to win. Her hand slipped into the pocket of her jeans, the one piece of her own clothing they'd let her keep until tomorrow. Her fingers closed around the small device she'd managed to hide during intake. The voice recorder she'd activated the moment Marcus suggested this appointment. Every word from the car ride, every threat disguised as concern, every calculated lie, all of it was captured on this tiny piece of technology. They'd search her tomorrow, find it probably. But tonight, she had one chance to hide it somewhere they wouldn't look. Somewhere Daniel would find it when he reviewed her case. If he reviewed her case? If he was even working today? If Marcus hadn't already thought of this possibility and done something to prevent it. Too many ifs. But Lily had learned long ago that success wasn't about certainty. It was about playing the odds, making the moves available to you, and refusing to quit even when the game seemed lost. She stood and walked to the small mirror above the sink, studying her reflection. Her mascara was smeared, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. She looked exactly how a mentally unstable woman should look. Perfect. Let Marcus think he'd broken her. Let him believe his plan was working flawlessly. Let him celebrate his victory while she planned her resurrection. Because Lily Harrison was about to teach her husband a lesson he'd never forget, about underestimating women. About confusing kindness for weakness. About the difference between taking what someone gives you and stealing what they've earned. The game had just begun, and Marcus had no idea he was playing against someone who'd already won against far more dangerous opponents. In the silence of room 237, Lily smiled for the first time since arriving. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd just declared war. And somewhere in this hospital, she hoped, was the cousin who'd always had her back. The brilliant psychiatrist who would see through Marcus's lies. The ally Marcus never knew existed. But first, she had to survive the night without them medicating her into oblivion. Without them adding more evidence to her file about erratic behavior or violent tendencies. She had to play the role of the compliant patient while keeping her mind sharp enough to fight back. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the small room. Outside her door, she could hear footsteps, distant screaming, the rattle of a medication cart making its evening rounds. This was her reality now. At least, this was the reality Marcus had created for her. What he didn't realize was that he'd just locked a fighter in a cage. And fighters, when cornered, don't surrender. They become something far more dangerous than their captors ever imagined. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to see how Lily turns the tables on the husband who thought he could steal everything she built. The medication cart stopped outside her door at 9 p.m. sharp. "Harrison, evening meds," a tired-looking nurse announced, entering without knocking. She held a small paper cup with 2 pills, one white, one blue, and a larger cup of water. Lily recognized the setup immediately. Compliance test. Take the pills without question, and they'd note cooperative patient. Refuse. And they'd mark her down as resistant to treatment, which would only strengthen Marcus's case that she needed to be here. What are they? Lily asked calmly, making no move to take the cups. The nurse sighed as if this was the 100th time she'd had this conversation today. Lorazepam for anxiety and risperidone for mood stabilization. Doctor's orders. Antipsychotics. They were already medicating her for conditions she didn't have, building a pharmaceutical paper trail that would make it nearly impossible to prove her sanity later. "I'd prefer to speak with my doctor first," Lily said, keeping her voice level. "Before starting any new medications. Your doctor prescribed these, Mrs. Harrison. Dr. Chen?" "I requested him specifically during intake." The nurse's expression shifted slightly. Confusion, maybe concern. "Dr. Chen doesn't work nights. Your assigned psychiatrist is Dr. Reeves. These are his orders." Lily's heart sank. Marcus must have moved faster than she'd anticipated. Of course he wouldn't risk her being assigned to a doctor who actually knew her, who might question the diagnosis. "I have the right to refuse medication," Lily tried, though she already knew how this would end. "You do," the nurse agreed, "but refusal will be documented in your file. And if Dr. Reeves deems you a danger to yourself or others, medication can be administered involuntarily." "Your choice, Mrs. Harrison." The threat was clear. Take the pills willingly, or they'd hold her down and inject her with something worse. Lily took the cups with steady hands. She placed the pills on her tongue, took a sip of water, and tilted her head back, as if swallowing. The nurse watched for a moment, then left, apparently satisfied. The moment the door clicked shut, Lily spit the pills into her hand and flushed them down the toilet. It was a trick she'd learned from a documentary about psychiatric facilities she'd watched years ago, never imagining she'd need the information herself. She couldn't afford to be sedated. Not tonight. Not when she needed to think clearly about her next move. Across town, in the home that had been hers before it became her prison, Marcus Harrison poured himself a celebratory scotch. The expensive kind. The kind Lily's money had bought. "Is it done?" The woman's voice came from the bedroom doorway. Vanessa Cross, 28 years old, Marcus's executive assistant for the past 2 years, though her job description had expanded considerably beyond scheduling meetings. She wore one of Lily's silk robes, her dark hair still damp from a shower in Lily's master bathroom. "All signed and delivered," Marcus said, raising his glass. "My poor, mentally unstable wife is exactly where she belongs." Vanessa crossed the room and draped herself across the leather sofa. "And the company?" "The emergency board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'll present the psychiatric evaluation, explain that Lily has been deteriorating for months, and propose that I assume temporary control of Harrison Digital Solutions until she recovers." Marcus smiled. "Which, tragically, she never will." "You're sure the doctors won't figure it out?" "Dr. Reeves owes me $50,000 in gambling debts. His evaluation will say whatever I need it to say. By the end of the week, I'll have full power of attorney, control of Lily's assets, and legal authority to make all decisions regarding her care." He took a long drink. "Including how long she stays at Riverside. And if she tells people the truth? If she claims you're doing this for her money?" Marcus laughed, the sound cold and amused. "Who's going to believe the paranoid delusions of a woman in a psychiatric hospital? That's the beauty of this plan, darling. Anything she says just proves she's exactly where she belongs." What Marcus didn't know was that at that exact moment, 3 floors above the women's ward at Riverside, Dr. Daniel Chun was reviewing the day's new admissions. Daniel had been at Riverside for exactly 6 weeks. Harvard Medical School, top of his class, specialized training in forensic psychiatry. At 35, he was the youngest senior psychiatrist on staff, which meant he handled complex cases and supervised junior doctors like the incompetent Dr. Reeves. He scrolled through the intake files with practiced efficiency until a name stopped him cold. Lily Harrison, age 42. Admitted involuntarily by spouse. Diagnosis: acute paranoid disorder with delusional episodes regarding marital partner. Daniel read the notes twice, then a third time. Lily. His cousin. The brilliant, sharp-minded woman who'd lent him money for medical school when his own parents couldn't afford it. The woman who'd built a tech empire through intelligence and determination. The woman who'd never shown even a hint of mental instability in the 30 years he'd known her. Committed by her husband for paranoid delusions about him. Daniel's jaw tightened. He pulled up the full intake report, reading every line with increasing concern. The symptoms described, the sudden onset, the convenient timing, none of it matched anything he knew about Lily or about genuine psychiatric breaks. He checked the assigned physician. Dr. Reeves. The man was barely competent on his best days, and Daniel had already flagged several of his evaluations as questionable. Dr. Chen? A night nurse appeared in his doorway. Sorry to bother you, but we have a situation with a patient in 237. She's refusing medication. What's the patient's name? Harrison? Lily Harrison. She's asking for you specifically. Claims she requested you during intake. Daniel stood immediately. I'll handle it personally. As he walked through the hospital corridors toward the women's ward, Daniel's mind raced through possibilities. Family loyalty aside, something about this case felt wrong. Involuntary commitments required substantial evidence of danger to self or others. The file mentioned neither, just vague descriptions of paranoia and delusions. He'd seen this pattern before, during his forensic training. Abusive spouses using the mental health system to control or eliminate partners. It was rare, difficult to prove, and devastating when it succeeded. The heavy door to the women's ward buzzed open. Daniel nodded to the night staff and made his way to room 237. Inside, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, her posture rigid, her eyes red but dry. When she saw him, relief flooded her face so completely that Daniel knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever was happening here had nothing to do with mental illness. Daniel, she breathed. Thank God. Hello, Lily. He closed the door behind him and kept his voice professional, aware that their conversation might be monitored. I understand you've been asking for me. I requested you during intake. They assigned me to someone else. Dr. Reeves. I've reviewed your file. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat, studying her carefully. She looked exhausted, frightened, but her eyes were clear and focused. No signs of psychosis, no flat affect, no disorganized thinking. Tell me what happened. From the beginning. And so Lily did. She told him about overhearing Marcus's phone call. About the months of gaslighting that followed, Marcus telling friends and family that she'd been acting strange, that he was worried about her. About this morning, when what she thought was a simple therapy appointment turned into an ambush. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression carefully neutral. But inside, rage built with every word. This wasn't treatment. This was imprisonment. I have proof, Lily said quietly, glancing at the door. A recording. Everything Marcus said in the car on the way here. But I need to hide it somewhere they won't find it during tomorrow's search. Where is it now? Lily reached into her pocket and produced a device no larger than a USB drive. I got it during intake by hiding it in my bra. Tomorrow they'll make me change into hospital clothes. They'll search everything. Daniel considered for a moment, then made a decision that could cost him his medical license if anyone discovered it. He held out his hand. Give it to me. I'll keep it in your medical file. They won't search that. Lily hesitated only a second before placing the recorder in his palm. Daniel, Marcus is going to try to take control of my company. There's a board meeting tomorrow. If he succeeds, one problem at a time, Daniel said gently. First, we establish that you don't belong here. That requires a proper psychiatric evaluation, which I'll conduct tomorrow. But Lily, you need to understand something. I can't just release you because you're my cousin. I have to follow protocol, document everything properly, or Marcus's lawyers will tear it apart. How long will that take? If I rush it, 2 to 3 days minimum. And that's if you can pass every assessment perfectly. If there's no evidence of the conditions Reeves diagnosed, if I can prove that your commitment was medically unjustified, I don't have 2 to 3 days. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10. Daniel's mind raced through options, each one carrying enormous risk. Finally, he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Calling your lawyer. You're allowed phone access for legal counsel, even as an involuntary patient. That's protected under patient rights. He paused. You do have a lawyer, don't you? Someone Marcus doesn't control? Lily thought quickly. Most of her legal team worked for the company, which meant they ultimately answered to the board. But there was one exception. Robert Chen, your father. Daniel smiled grimly. Dad's going to love this. Nothing makes him happier than destroying someone who's abused the legal system. He began dialing. We can't get you out tonight, but we can make sure Marcus doesn't steal your company while you're stuck in here. Daniel, Lily said softly. Thank you. For believing me. Lily, I've known you since we were kids. I've seen you build an empire from nothing. I've watched you navigate business deals that would have crushed weaker people. He met her eyes. You're the sanest person I know. Whatever Marcus is trying to do, we're going to stop him. As Daniel stepped into the hallway to make the call, Lily felt hope flicker for the first time since arriving. She wasn't alone. She had an ally inside these walls, someone with the authority and expertise to challenge her diagnosis. But she also knew Marcus. Knew how thoroughly he planned, how many contingencies he prepared for. He wouldn't have committed her without considering the possibility that someone might question it. Which meant he had another move planned. Another trap waiting. The question was, what would he do when he discovered that his perfect plan had a flaw named Daniel Chen? At 6:47 a.m. the next morning, Marcus Harrison stood before the full board of Harrison Digital Solutions, projecting the perfect image of a devoted husband bearing terrible news. I know this is sudden, he said, his voice heavy with manufactured grief. Lily's decline has been gradual, but yesterday it reached a crisis point. Her psychiatrist felt immediate intervention was necessary. The 12 board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. These were people Lily had hired personally. People who'd worked alongside her for years. But Marcus had spent months preparing them for this moment, dropping hints about her erratic behavior, her mood swings, her increasing paranoia. I have Dr. Reeves's evaluation here, Marcus continued, sliding folders across the conference table. He's diagnosed acute paranoid disorder with delusional episodes. The delusions primarily center around me. She believes I'm trying to harm her, steal from her, that sort of thing. Board member Patricia Torres, Lily's oldest friend on the team, spoke up. Marcus, I saw Lily 3 days ago. She seemed completely normal. How does someone deteriorate this quickly? That's the insidious nature of this type of break, Marcus replied smoothly. Patients often appear functional right up until they're not. The evaluation is quite clear. What Marcus didn't know was that at that exact moment, in a small conference room at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital, a very different meeting was taking place. Robert Chen, 68 years old, and one of Chicago's most feared litigation attorneys, sat across from his son Daniel and their client. He'd driven through the night after Daniel's call, arriving at Riverside at dawn. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Robert said, his voice dangerously quiet. Your husband had you involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility based on a diagnosis made by a doctor who spent less than 15 minutes with you, and who happens to owe your husband a substantial gambling debt. That's correct, Lily confirmed. And during the car ride to the hospital, you recorded him discussing his plan to seize control of your company by having you declared mentally incompetent. Every word. Robert's eyes gleamed with the anticipation of a predator who'd just scented blood. Mrs. Harrison, by the time I'm finished with your husband, he's going to wish he'd simply filed for divorce like a normal greedy spouse. Daniel pulled up the recording on his laptop. Dad, you need to hear this. Marcus's voice filled the small room. Tinny but unmistakable. Just stay calm, Lily. The doctors are going to help you. Once you're settled, I'll make sure the company is taken care of. You don't need to worry about any of that anymore. Then Lily's voice, already slurring from whatever they'd given her. "Marcus, please, I'm not sick." "You don't have to do this. Sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly. That's why we're here. In a few weeks, once you're stable, we can discuss your return. But right now, I need you to trust me." The recording continued. Marcus on the phone with someone, thinking Lily had passed out in the back seat. "She's sedated." "No, Reeves will handle the evaluation. By Monday, I'll have power of attorney." "Yes, the board meeting is tomorrow." "They won't fight it. Not with a psychiatric hold in place." Robert stopped the playback. "That's conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, and about 6 other felonies I can think of off the top of my head." He looked at Lily. "The question is, what do you want? Criminal prosecution? Civil suit? Both?" "I want my company back," Lily said flatly. "And I want Marcus to understand what it feels like to have everything stolen by someone you trusted. Consider it done." Robert pulled out his phone. "Daniel, you're certain about her mental state?" "I'll have a full evaluation completed by noon," Daniel said. "But Dad, I can tell you right now, there's nothing wrong with her. Reeves's diagnosis is garbage, and I'm prepared to testify to that in any court." "Good, because we're going to need to move fast." Robert began typing. Marcus called an emergency board meeting this morning. He's presenting Reeves's evaluation and asking for temporary control of the company. If the board votes in his favor. "They can't vote without me," Lily interrupted. "I'm still the majority shareholder. My voting rights don't disappear just because I'm in a hospital." "They do if you're declared mentally incompetent," Robert countered. Which is exactly what Marcus is arguing. He'll claim you're unable to make sound business decisions. "That your commitment proves it." Lily felt panic rising again, but forced it down. "So what do we do?" Robert smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We crash his little board meeting. Remotely, of course, since you can't leave yet. But there's nothing in the bylaws that says you need to be physically present to exercise your voting rights." "Dad, she's still a patient here," Daniel warned. "If she participates in a board meeting, Marcus's lawyers will argue she's not receiving proper treatment, that we're enabling her supposed delusions. Let them argue it. I'll have documentation from you, a board-certified psychiatrist, stating that she's perfectly capable of managing her affairs. Reeves's evaluation will look like the joke it is when compared to yours." Robert looked at his watch. "The meeting starts in 90 minutes. Daniel, get me that evaluation." "Lily, I need you to write down everything you remember about Marcus's behavior over the past few months. Every conversation, every witness, every detail." As they worked, Marcus was delivering his closing argument to the board. "I know this is difficult," he said, managing to sound both sorrowful and strong. "Lily built this company, and she deserves to see it thrive when she recovers. But right now, she needs treatment, not stress. I'm asking the board to grant me temporary operational authority until her doctors clear her to return." Patricia Torres wasn't convinced. "Marcus, with all due respect, this feels rushed. Can we at least postpone the vote until we can visit Lily ourselves? Hear from her directly?" "I understand your concern," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "But every day without clear leadership damages the company. Our investors are already asking questions. We need stability, and we need it now." The board members exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus could see them wavering, could feel victory within his grasp. Then Patricia's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. She frowned at the screen. "It's from Robert Chen. He's listed as the company's counsel of record." Marcus's stomach dropped. Robert Chen, Lily's uncle by marriage, the attorney who'd handled the company's formation. He hadn't even considered. Patricia accepted the call, and Robert's face filled the screen at the head of the table. "Good morning, board," Robert said pleasantly. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I have someone who'd like to address you before any votes are taken." The camera shifted, and there was Lily. She looked tired but composed, sitting in what was clearly a hospital room, but speaking with absolute clarity. "Hello, everyone," Lily said. "I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but as you may have heard, I'm currently a patient at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital." Marcus felt the color drain from his face. This wasn't possible. She was supposed to be sedated, compliant, too medicated to fight back. I want to address the allegations my husband has made about my mental state, Lily continued, her voice steady and professional. Marcus claims I'm suffering from paranoid delusions specifically about him. But what I actually discovered, and what I can prove with recordings and documentation, is that Marcus has been systematically planning to have me committed so he can seize control of my assets. This is outrageous, Marcus sputtered. She's clearly, Mr. Harrison. Robert's voice cut through like a blade. You'll have your chance to respond. Right now, my client is exercising her right as majority shareholder to address her own board. Lily pulled out papers. 3 weeks ago, I overheard Marcus on the phone discussing the trust and power of attorney and how to have me declared incompetent. I began recording our conversations after that. I have evidence of him coordinating with Dr. Reeves, a psychiatrist who owes him $50,000, to fabricate a diagnosis. I have evidence of him discussing the seizure of my company with his mistress, Vanessa Cross, who many of you know as his executive assistant. The boardroom erupted. Patricia looked at Marcus with something close to hatred. Other board members were pulling out phones, presumably calling lawyers. Marcus tried to regain control. These are exactly the kind of paranoid accusations Dr. Reeves warned us about. She's claiming conspiracies that don't exist, seeing threats where there are none. I have recordings, Lily said simply. Robert has copies. So does Dr. Daniel Chun, the senior psychiatrist at Riverside, who conducted my actual evaluation this morning. Would you like to hear them? The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia spoke first. Marcus, I move that we table this discussion pending a full investigation into these allegations. Seconded, another board member said immediately. All in favor? Every hand went up except Marcus's. The motion carries, Patricia said coldly. Marcus, I think you should leave. Now. Marcus stood, his carefully constructed facade cracking. You're making a mistake. She's not well. She needs help. What she needs, Robert's voice came through the speaker, is for you to be very far away from her and her company. I've already filed for an emergency restraining order and contacted the state medical board about Dr. Reeves. By end of business today, you'll be facing criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and false imprisonment. Marcus looked around the boardroom at faces that had once smiled at him, people who'd shaken his hand at company events. Now they looked at him like he was something diseased. He walked out without another word, pulling out his phone as he went. Vanessa, he said when she answered, we have a problem. Pack your things. We need to leave town today. Back at Riverside, Lily ended the video call and sagged back against her pillows, exhausted but triumphant. That, Robert said with satisfaction, is how you defend a company. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. How do you feel? Like I just fought the first battle of a very long war, Lily admitted. Marcus isn't going to just accept this. He'll have a backup plan. Let him plan, Robert said. Every move he makes now, we'll be watching. And Lily, I promise you by the time this is over, he won't just lose your company. He'll lose everything. But what none of them knew was that Marcus was already 3 steps ahead. As he drove away from Harrison Digital Solutions for the last time, he made another call. It's me, he said when a familiar voice answered. The hospital plan failed. We're moving to Plan B. Are you sure? The voice asked. Plan B is permanent. I'm sure. If I can't have her company, nobody can. Especially not her. He hung up and merged onto the highway, leaving Chicago behind. By tomorrow, one way or another, Lily Harrison would no longer be a problem. And somewhere in an office building downtown, a man Marcus had paid very well began making preparations to ensure that Lily's stay at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital ended very differently than she was planning. The man Marcus hired was named Thomas Wade. Former hospital security, fired 3 years ago for inappropriate conduct with patients. He still had friends at Riverside, friends who could be bought. At 11 p.m. that night, Wade entered through the service entrance using a stolen keycard. His instructions were simple. Make it look like Lily had a violent psychotic episode. sedate her heavily, rough her up enough to justify restraints, and create a scene that would give Reeves ammunition to declare her genuinely dangerous. If she got hurt badly enough to require intensive medical care, even better. Patients in medically induced comas couldn't fight legal battles. Wade made his way toward the women's ward, nodding to a night janitor he recognized. Everything was going smoothly until he rounded the corner and nearly walked straight into Dr. Daniel Chen. "Can I help you?" Daniel asked, his tone polite but his eyes sharp. "Just visiting a patient," Wade said, forcing a casual smile. "At 11 p.m.? Visiting hours ended at 8. Daniel's hand moved subtly toward his phone. "What's your name?" Wade didn't answer. He turned and walked quickly back the way he'd come, breaking into a run once he was out of sight. Daniel immediately called security, then raced to room 237. Lily was awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with legal documents spread around her. Robert had arranged for her to receive everything she needed to prepare her defense. "We need to move you," Daniel said urgently. "Now." "What's wrong?" "Someone just tried to access the women's ward. He ran when I questioned him." "Lily, I think Marcus sent someone." Before Lily could respond, the lights went out. Emergency backup generators kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing the hallway in dim red light. But those 3 seconds were all Wade needed. He'd cut the main power from the basement electrical room, and now he was moving fast. Daniel pulled Lily out of her room. "The staff break room. It locks from inside." They made it 15 feet before Wade appeared at the end of the corridor. He was holding something that gleamed in the emergency lighting, a syringe. "Dr. Chen," Wade said pleasantly, "step aside. This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't." Daniel positioned himself between Wade and Lily. "I've already called security. They're on their way. Then I'll have to work fast." Wade lunged forward. What happened next occurred in seconds but felt like hours. Daniel grabbed Wade's wrist, trying to keep the syringe away from both of them. They struggled, crashing against the wall. The syringe went flying, skittering across the floor. Lily didn't freeze. Didn't scream. Instead, she grabbed the nearest object, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, and brought it down on Wade's shoulder with every ounce of strength she had. Wade howled and stumbled. Daniel used the opportunity to get him in a headlock, forcing him face down on the floor. Security burst through the doors 30 seconds later, followed by 2 police officers who'd been in the building on an unrelated call. As they cuffed Wade, Daniel picked up the syringe with a tissue, careful not to contaminate it. "Get this to the lab. I want to know exactly what was in here." One of the officers was already on his radio. "We need a detective at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital." Attempted assault on a patient. Wade, realizing how badly this had gone, made one last desperate play. "I want a lawyer. And I want to make a deal. I have information about who hired me." The detective who arrived 40 minutes later was named Sarah Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of case Chicago had to offer. She listened to Lily's story, reviewed the security footage, and examined the syringe contents report that came back from the lab. "Propofol and ketamine," she read aloud. "Enough to knock out a horse. Mr. Wade, you want to tell me who paid you to assault Mrs. Harrison?" Wade's lawyer whispered in his ear. Wade nodded. "Marcus Harrison, her husband. He paid me $20,000 to make her look violent, unstable. Said if I could put her in a coma, there'd be another 30. Morrison turned to Lily. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm going to need copies of those recordings your lawyer mentioned." "All of them." Detective Robert Chen appeared in the doorway, looking entirely too pleased with himself for midnight on a Thursday. "I have everything you need. Recordings, financial documentation, witness statements, and a very cooperative doctor. Reeves, who's decided that testifying against Marcus Harrison is preferable to losing his medical license." By 2 a.m., Marcus Harrison was in handcuffs. They found him at a motel near the airport, bags already packed. Vanessa was with him, hysterical and claiming she knew nothing about any of it. "Marcus Harrison," Detective Morrison said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, attempted assault, and about 8 other charges I'm still working on." Marcus didn't struggle, didn't protest. He just looked at Morrison with dead eyes and said, "I want to call my lawyer." "You're going to need a good one," Morrison replied. The trial took 6 months to prepare. But when it finally happened, it lasted only 3 days. The prosecution presented the recordings of Marcus discussing the conspiracy, Dr. Reeves's testimony about being coerced into providing a false diagnosis, Wade's detailed account of being hired to assault Lily, financial records showing Marcus's gambling debts, his payments to Wade, his secret bank account shared with Vanessa. Marcus's defense attorney tried to argue that Lily had manipulated the situation, that her recordings were taken out of context, that Marcus had genuinely believed she was mentally ill. Then the prosecution played the final recording, the one from the car ride to Riverside that Lily hadn't shared publicly until now. Marcus's voice cold and calculating. "Once she's committed, it's over. No court will believe her. The best part is, even if she tries to fight it, every word she says just makes her look crazier. It's the perfect crime, Vanessa. We get everything, and she gets a padded room." The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Reyes, didn't hide her disgust as she read the sentence. "Mr. Harrison, you attempted to destroy your wife's life, steal her company, and have her permanently institutionalized for your own financial gain. You perverted the mental health system, endangered her physical safety, and showed absolutely no remorse for your actions." She paused, looking at him over her glasses. 20 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. And I'm ordering full restitution to Mrs. Harrison for all legal fees, emotional damages, and punitive damages in the amount of $50 million. Marcus's face drained of color. "Your Honor, I don't have $50 million. Then you'll spend the rest of your life paying it off. Maybe that will give you time to reflect on what happens when you underestimate the woman you tried to destroy." Lily sat in the gallery, flanked by Daniel and Robert, and felt something like peace settle over her for the first time in months. Vanessa received 5 years as an accessory. Dr. Reeves lost his medical license and got 3 years. Wade took a plea deal for 7 years. But Marcus got 20. 20 years of knowing that the woman he tried to cage had not only escaped, but had systematically dismantled his life with the same precision she'd used to build her company. As the guards led Marcus away, he looked back at Lily one final time. She met his gaze steadily, and though she said nothing, her expression conveyed everything he needed to know. She'd won, completely, utterly, permanently. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions. Lily stood at the microphone with Robert beside her, composed and professional. "I want to thank the Chicago Police Department, the prosecutor's office, and most especially Dr. Daniel Chun, whose integrity and quick thinking saved my life," she said. "What happened to me could happen to anyone. Abusers don't always use their fists. Sometimes they use the systems designed to help us medical, legal, financial, and turn them into weapons." A reporter called out, "What's next for you, Mrs. Harrison?" Lily smiled. "I'm returning to my company. I'm establishing a foundation to help other victims of institutional abuse. And I'm living my life on my terms, which is something my ex-husband tried very hard to prevent." "Do you have anything to say to Marcus?" Lily's smile turned cold. "Just this. You thought putting me in a cage would break me. Instead, it taught me exactly how strong I am. And that strength is something you'll have 20 years to think about." The crowd erupted with more questions, but Robert guided her toward the waiting car. Inside, as they pulled away from the courthouse, Daniel handed her a glass of champagne. "To freedom," he said. "To family," Lily corrected, touching her glass to his. "I wouldn't have survived without you. You would have found a way," Daniel said. "That's who you are." As Chicago rolled past the windows, Lily thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Trusting. Maybe too trusting. Willing to see the best in people, even when they showed her their worst. That woman was gone, burned away in the fluorescent lights of a psychiatric ward. The woman who'd emerged was harder, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who mistook her kindness for weakness. And if this story of justice and survival resonated with you, Subscribe to see how Lily rebuilds her empire and ensures that no one ever underestimates her again. 2 years later, Lily Harrison stood on stage at the National Women in Business Summit, addressing an audience of 3,000 entrepreneurs, executives, and advocates. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair cut shorter now, more confident. The woman who'd once been dragged into a psychiatric hospital against her will had been replaced by someone even more formidable than before. "When someone tries to destroy you," Lily said into the microphone, her voice carrying to every corner of the convention hall, "they give you a choice. You can let that destruction define you, or you can use it as fuel to become something they never imagined you could be." The audience leaned forward, captivated. 2 years ago, my husband had me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. He paid a corrupt doctor to diagnose me with conditions I didn't have. He hired someone to assault me. He tried to steal my company and lock me away forever. Lily paused. He failed. And not just failed, he gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. She clicked to the next slide, showing a photo of a beautiful modern building with glass walls and green spaces. The Harrison Foundation for Institutional Justice. We've helped 372 people escape similar situations in the past 18 months. We've had 12 corrupt medical professionals stripped of their licenses. We've changed legislation in 4 states to make it harder for abusers to weaponize the mental health system. Applause thundered through the hall. My company, Harrison Digital Solutions, has tripled in value since I retook control. We're now valued at $600 million. I've hired exclusively from populations that face systematic barriers, women over 40, people with disabilities, survivors of domestic violence, and you know what we discovered? Lily smiled. When you hire people who've had to fight for everything they have, who've survived things that would break weaker individuals, you get the most loyal, creative, and determined workforce in any industry. More applause, louder now. So, to everyone out there who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told they're too emotional, too old, too broken to succeed, thank you to everyone who doubted you. They gave you fuel. They showed you exactly what you're capable of overcoming. Use it. As Lily left the stage to a standing ovation, her assistant handed her a phone. "Mrs. Harrison, you have a message from the warden at Stateville Prison." Lily's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened slightly. "What does it say?" "Marcus Harrison is requesting a visitation. He says he needs to speak with you." "It's urgent." Lily had received similar requests monthly for the past 2 years. She'd ignored every single one. "Tell them no," she said simply. "He had 15 years to speak to me like I was a human being. That time is over." 300 miles away, in a maximum security facility, Marcus Harrison sat in his cell and stared at the letter he'd written. His lawyer had told him it was useless, that Lily would never respond. But he'd written it anyway. "Lily, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand that I never meant for things to go as far as they did. It started as just wanting more control over the business decisions, and then it spiraled, and by the time I realized how wrong I was in too deep. The letter went on for 3 pages. Excuses, mostly. Attempts to rationalize the irrational. Marcus had convinced himself that if he could just explain properly, Lily would understand that he wasn't a monster, just a man who'd made terrible choices. But the letter would never be sent. His cellmate, a man serving life for armed robbery, had read it over his shoulder and laughed. "You still don't get it," the cellmate said. "You tried to put her in a cage, and now you're the one in a cage. That's called karma, brother. And from what I've read about her, she's never thinking about you at all. You're already forgotten." That was the part that haunted Marcus most. Not the prison time, not the loss of his freedom, but the knowledge that Lily had moved on completely. She'd turned his attempt to destroy her into the foundation of an even greater empire. She'd become more successful, more powerful, more respected than she'd ever been when they were married. And he'd become nothing. A cautionary tale. A forgotten man in a cell, rotting away while the woman he tried to cage soared higher than ever. Vanessa's fate was perhaps more pathetic. Released after serving 3 years, she'd tried to rebuild her life but found every door closed. No legitimate PR firm would hire her. Her name was permanently linked to one of the most publicized fraud cases in recent history. She'd tried to write a book, The Woman Behind the Scandal, trying to position herself as another victim of Marcus's manipulation. Publishers rejected it universally. The few interviews she managed to secure focused on her complicity, not her victimhood. Last anyone heard, she was working retail in a strip mall in Indiana, living in a studio apartment, driving a 15-year-old car. Everything she'd sacrificed her integrity for, the money, the status, the luxury lifestyle, was gone. And unlike Lily, who'd built her success through talent and work, Vanessa had nothing to fall back on. No skills beyond manipulation, no network beyond people who now despised her. Dr. Reeves never practiced medicine again. His testimony against Marcus had saved him from prison time, but the medical board had been merciless. He worked now as a medical transcriptionist, making 1/10 of his former salary, living with the knowledge that his greed had cost him everything he'd spent years building. But the story didn't end with their destruction. That would have been justice, perhaps, but not transformation. 6 months after the trial, Lily received a letter from a woman named Catherine Miller. Catherine's husband had tried the same scheme, fake psychiatric commitment to steal assets, but Catherine didn't have a doctor, Daniel Chun, to save her. She'd spent 3 years institutionalized before a clerical error revealed the fraud. "I saw your foundation," Catherine wrote. "I saw what you're doing. And I want to help. I want other women to have the fighting chance I didn't have." Catherine became the foundation's first employee. Then came others. A former patient who'd been committed by her abusive father. A whistleblower who'd exposed corruption in a psychiatric facility and lost her career for it. A lawyer who specialized in medical malpractice. One by one, survivors found their way to the Harrison Foundation. And one by one, Lily gave them what Marcus had tried to take from her: purpose, power, and the tools to fight back. Daniel had expanded his role at Riverside, becoming the director of patient advocacy. He'd implemented new protocols for involuntary commitments, requiring multiple independent evaluations and patient advocates at every step. The changes had been adopted by hospitals across Illinois, then nationwide. "You started a revolution," he told Lily over dinner one evening. "Every psychiatric hospital in the country is reviewing their commitment procedures because of what happened to you." "Good," Lily said. "No one else should have to go through what I did. Do you ever regret it? The marriage, I mean, 15 years of your life with someone who turned out to be a monster?" Lily considered the question carefully. "I regret trusting him when he showed me who he really was. I regret ignoring red flags because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. But do I regret the experience?" She shook her head. "That experience taught me more about human nature, about resilience, about my own strength than anything else in my life. Marcus thought he was destroying me. What he actually did was forge me into something unbreakable." She raised her glass. "So here's to the people who try to destroy us. They have no idea they're actually creating their own worst nightmare." On a Thursday afternoon 3 years after her release from Riverside, Lily received an unexpected visitor at her office. Patricia Torres, her former board member and longtime friend, arrived with a woman Lily didn't recognize. The woman was young, maybe 30, with nervous eyes and trembling hands. "Lily," Patricia said gently, "this is Amy Chun. No relation to Daniel." She added with a small smile, "Amy's husband is trying to have her committed. She found your foundation online and reached out. I thought you might want to meet her personally." Lily stood immediately, coming around her desk to take Amy's hands. "Tell me everything." Amy's story was achingly familiar. A controlling husband who'd isolated her from friends and family. Threats disguised as concern. A psychiatrist who'd already agreed to sign commitment papers without ever meeting her. A plan to seize control of her inheritance from her late parents. "I don't know what to do," Amy whispered. "I don't have proof like you did. I don't have recordings or evidence. It's just his word against mine, and everyone thinks he's wonderful. Then we create the proof," Lily said firmly. "And we make sure he never gets the chance to go through with this." She pulled out her phone, calling her foundation's legal team. Within hours, Amy was protected by a restraining order. Her assets frozen to prevent her husband from accessing them, and a team of lawyers building a case against him. 2 weeks later, Amy's husband withdrew his commitment petition. 1 month after that, Amy filed for divorce. 6 months later, she joined the Harrison Foundation as a volunteer coordinator. "You saved my life," Amy told Lily on her first day. "No," Lily corrected gently. "You saved your own life by having the courage to ask for help. I just provided the tools." But privately, Lily felt a deep satisfaction. Every person she helped, every abuser she stopped, was another victory over Marcus. Not because she was competing with him, he was rotting in prison, irrelevant, because she was proving something more important. She was proving that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building something so magnificent that they became irrelevant, something that helped others. Something that made the world better despite their attempts to make it worse. 5 years after her release from Riverside, Lily stood once again at a podium. This time it was a TED Talk, and her topic was, "The cage you escape becomes your foundation." "They tried to lock me away," she told the audience of millions watching worldwide. "They tried to silence me, discredit me, steal everything I'd built. And for a brief moment, they succeeded. I was in that psychiatric ward, medicated against my will, watching my life be stolen piece by piece." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But here's what they didn't understand. You can cage a person's body, but you can't cage their mind. You can't cage their determination. You can't cage the part of them that refuses to surrender. The audience was silent, riveted. So, to everyone watching who's ever been underestimated, who's ever been told they're too weak or too broken or too damaged to fight back, you're stronger than you know. The cage they're trying to build around you? It's actually the foundation for something they can't even imagine. Use it. Build on it. Rise from it. She smiled, and it was genuine, warm, triumphant. And to the people who try to cage others, enjoy your power while it lasts. Because the moment your victim realizes they're stronger than your cage, it's over. Not just for the cage. For you. The applause was deafening. That evening, in his prison cell, Marcus Harrison watched the TED Talk on the small television inmates were allowed during recreation time. He watched Lily command that stage, watched the audience hang on her every word, watched her success play out in real time. And for the first time in 5 years, he truly understood what he'd done. He hadn't just failed to steal her company. He'd created his own destroyer. Every day she succeeded was another day proving his irrelevance. Every person she saved was another indictment of his cruelty. Every award she won, every speech she gave, every life she changed was a monument to his failure. He'd tried to bury her, and instead he'd planted her. And she'd grown into something far more powerful than the woman he'd tried to destroy. Marcus turned off the television and lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, contemplating the next 15 years of his sentence. 15 more years of watching Lily Harrison rise while he rotted. The cage he'd tried to build for her had become his own. And unlike her, he would never escape it. Outside the prison walls, life moved on without him. Lily Harrison continued to build her empire, her foundation, her legacy. She dated occasionally but never remarried, finding that she preferred her independence to any relationship. "I was someone's wife once," she told an interviewer. "I'm happier being my own person." Her company continued to grow. Her foundation expanded to 6 states. She wrote a best-selling memoir that became required reading in business schools and women's advocacy programs worldwide. And every single day, she woke up free to make her own choices, control her own destiny, live life on her own terms. That freedom was worth more than any revenge could ever be. 10 years after the trial, on the anniversary of her release from Riverside, Lily visited the hospital one final time. Daniel met her at the entrance. "Thought you might come today," he said, hugging her. They walked through the facility together, but it looked different now. The protocols Daniel had implemented had transformed the place. Patient advocates at every level. Multiple physician evaluations for any involuntary commitment. Regular audits to prevent abuse. "Room 237, Lily said, stopping outside her former cell. Daniel unlocked it. The room was empty now, waiting for the next patient. But it looked less like a prison than it had 10 years ago. Warmer lighting, better furniture, windows that actually opened. "Do you ever think about him?" Daniel asked quietly. "Marcus?" Lily shook her head. "Not anymore. For a long time I was angry. Then I was determined to prove him wrong. But eventually, I realized the best thing I could do was forget he existed." She turned to her cousin. "He tried to make me disappear. Instead, he disappeared. From my thoughts, from my life, from mattering at all. That's the ultimate revenge, isn't it?" "Irrelevance. It's not revenge," Lily corrected gently. "Revenge is when you hurt someone because they hurt you. This is just ... moving forward, building something better, living well." They stood in silence for a moment, then Lily smiled. "Come on. I have 3 new cases waiting at the foundation, and one of them sounds exactly like what happened to me. I want to make sure this woman gets a better outcome." As they left Riverside for the last time, Lily didn't look back. She'd spent enough time looking backward, analyzing what had happened, understanding the betrayal. Now she only looked forward. To the next person she'd help, the next company milestone, the next expansion of her foundation. The next proof that strength isn't about never being knocked down, it's about how magnificently you rise. Marcus Harrison had tried to destroy Lily Harrison. What he'd actually done was create a legend. A woman who'd survived the unimaginable and turned it into purpose. Who'd been caged and used that cage as a springboard to heights he could never reach. He'd wanted to steal her fortune. Instead, he'd given her something far more valuable. Proof that she was unstoppable. And that lesson had cost him everything while costing her nothing she wasn't willing to pay. In the end, the man who'd tried to lock her in a cage spent his life in one, while the woman he'd tried to destroy lived free and thrived beyond his wildest imagination. Sometimes justice isn't just served. Sometimes it's poetic. If this story showed you that resilience and intelligence can overcome even the darkest betrayals, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of triumph over impossible odds. And remember, the people who try to cage you are actually building the foundation for your greatest success. Use it, rise from it, and never, ever let them convince you that you're too broken to fight back. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were just being forged into something stronger than they could ever comprehend.